They gave my sister the family home and told me I didn't deserve it. What they didn't know was that I was the one paying the mortgage, and soon they'd all be asking the same question: who actually owns this house? The tension hit me the moment I walked into my parents' house in the Atlanta suburbs last Sunday. It was just a normal family dinner, or so I thought. I was coming straight from a fundraising event for the nonprofit I work at, so I was still in my simple navy blue work dress. My father, Marcus, was glued to the football game on the 65-inch screen that dominated the living room. "Hey, Dad," I said. He just grunted in response. "Oh, Serena, you're here." My mother, Brenda, didn't look up from her phone. She was sitting on the sofa scrolling through Facebook. "Go ahead and sit down, just don't block the TV. Your father's team is playing." I stood there for a moment, invisible in my own childhood home. The smell of roasted chicken, usually so comforting, just made my stomach tighten. That's when I heard the giggling from the love seat. My younger sister Danielle was curled up next to her husband Chad. She was 29, but she still acted like a spoiled teenager. She held up a brand new, blindingly white designer handbag. "Look," she trilled, using the nickname I hated. "Chad bought me a present just because." Chad, her 30-year-old husband, smirked. He was a white guy from Buckhead who always looked at me like I was something he'd scraped off his shoe. "She deserves it, right? A woman like my Danielle needs to be taken care of." Danielle swung the bag by its strap, aiming her next comment right at me. "I bet this thing costs more than your whole paycheck, huh? How is that little helping people job going, Serena? Still saving the world for minimum wage?" I forced a tight smile. "It's a nonprofit, Danielle. The salary isn't the point. We just secured a grant to stop foreclosures in the West End." "Foreclosures? How boring!" she laughed, turning to bury her face in Chad's neck. "Chad says we should buy a second house, maybe on the lake." "Enough chatter," Marcus boomed, suddenly clicking the TV off. The sudden silence was jarring. He stood up, stretching his arms. He was 60 years old and still had an imposing presence. "Your mother and I have an announcement to make." Brenda finally put her phone down, her face taking on a look of practiced seriousness. She moved to stand beside him, a united front. I felt a familiar knot of dread. Announcements in this family rarely meant good news for me. "Well," Marcus began, "as you know, I've been with the firm for 40 years. Brenda and I have worked hard, we've built a good life, we've raised 2 beautiful daughters." He nodded at Danielle, his gaze sliding right past me. "And now it's time for us to think about our future, our retirement." Danielle gasped, her eyes lighting up. "Oh, Daddy, are you finally retiring? Does that mean we can go to Europe?" "Patience, sweetheart," Brenda said, patting her arm. "Your father is getting to the important part." Marcus cleared his throat. "We've spoken to our lawyer. We've updated our estate plan. We've decided that effective on our retirement at the end of this year, we will be transferring ownership of this house to Danielle and Chad." The words hung in the air. I physically recoiled as if I'd been struck. "What?" I whispered. My voice sounded thin, unfamiliar. Brenda rushed in, her voice syrupy and sweet. "It just makes sense, honey. Your sister deserves it. She and Chad need a stable place to build their family, to give us the grandchildren we've been waiting for." "We have to be practical, Serena," Marcus added, his tone cold and logical. "You're 32. You're single. You live in a 1-bedroom apartment downtown. What would you possibly do with a 4-bedroom house in the suburbs? Danielle needs this. You don't." I couldn't feel my legs. "I'm your daughter, too," I stammered, the words feeling weak. "I helped all these years. I've been helping." "Oh, don't be so selfish, Serena," Brenda snapped, her sweet facade vanishing. "You're the older sister. It's your job to help your family. You should be happy for Danielle. She's finally settling down." Danielle and Chad were kissing, a theatrical display of joy. "Oh my God, Chad, our own house. We can finally host the neighborhood block party." I looked from their celebrating faces to my parents' hard, resolved expressions. They had discussed this, planned this, and they had waited to drop this bomb on me in person, surrounded by family, where I couldn't make a scene. The smell of the chicken was making me sick. I have to go, I mumbled, grabbing my purse. What? You're not staying for dinner? Brenda asked, annoyed. I made your favorite potato salad. I'm not hungry, I said, already moving toward the door. Congratulations, Danielle. You deserve it. I didn't wait for a reply. I walked out of that house, the place I had grown up, the place I had sacrificed to save, and I didn't look back. I sat in my 10-year-old Camry for a full 5 minutes, just trying to breathe. The humiliation was so thick, I felt like I was choking. I finally put the key in the ignition, my hand shaking. I was halfway home when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mom. My heart stupidly jumped. Maybe she was apologizing. I opened it. The message read, "Oh, Serena, your father forgot. The mortgage payment is due tomorrow. Go ahead and send the $2,800 like you usually do. Now that the house is Danielle's, she'll really need your support to get started. Don't let the bank call, okay? It stresses your father out." I read the text once, then twice. The exhaustion vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp anger that cleared my head instantly. Like usual, your support. Don't let the bank call. The audacity of it, the sheer breathtaking entitlement. I gripped the phone, my knuckles turning white. My mind flashed back 10 years, 2015. I was 22, fresh out of college with my degree in data science, barely a month into my first job at the nonprofit. The financial crisis had finally caught up to my father. He'd been fired from his high-paying bank job. Not just laid off, I'd later discover, but fired for catastrophic mismanagement and risky investments that had blown up in his face. They were 3 months behind on the mortgage. The foreclosure notice was already on the door. I remembered sitting at that same dining room table, my father, a broken man, pleading with me. "You're our only hope, Serena. You have to save us." His voice wasn't booming then. It was weak, pathetic. My mother was even worse, crying, clinging to my arm. "We can't be homeless, Serena. Your salary, it's stable. The bank will trust you. You're the responsible one." They weren't asking. They were demanding. They took me at 22 to the bank and had me sign papers making my $45,000 a year salary responsible for their $3,000 mortgage. They told me I was co-signing. They lied. They made me the primary debtor. But that wasn't the whole story. That wasn't my secret. They thought my $45,000 a year salary was my only income. They never knew about my real work. While I was in college, I hadn't just been studying. I had been building something. A proprietary algorithm to analyze market risk in underserved communities. A tool to predict financial bubbles. The month before they begged me for help, I had secretly sold the first-generation demo of that algorithm to a small equity fund in Switzerland. The price was $150,000. I looked at that money in my new secret bank account. I knew if I gave it to them, it would be gone in months. Wasted on new cars, designer bags for Danielle, and more bad investments by my father. So I made a different choice. I created Cascade Holdings, LLC, a shell corporation registered in Delaware. I used my $150,000 as capital. And then Cascade Holdings, LLC, bought their mortgage from Bank of America for pennies on the dollar. For 10 years, Marcus and Brenda Washington had no idea who their lender was. For 10 years, I paid that $2,800 mortgage payment to myself from my nonprofit salary into my corporate account. I was the bank. I was the one they were afraid of, and they had just given my property away. I stared at that text message, the blue bubble glowing in the darkness of my apartment. Send the $2,800 like usual. Like usual, as if it were a Netflix subscription, as if it weren't the lifeblood I had been draining from my own veins for a decade to keep them comfortable. As if they hadn't just taken the very asset I was protecting and handed it to the one person who had never worked the day in her life. My mother's casual entitlement, my father's negligent silence, Danielle's greedy celebration, it all coalesced into a single cold point of clarity. They didn't just forget me, they actively erased me. They took my sacrifice, repackaged it, and called it a gift for my sister. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. Now that the house is Danielle's, she'll really need your support. My own mother telling me to pay the mortgage on a house I was just disinherited from in favor of my sister. The sister who thought my life's work was boring. I thought about the last 10 years. The cramped one-bedroom apartment I lived in, the 10-year-old car I drove. I thought about the vacations I never took, the nice clothes I never bought. I thought about the lie I had lived pretending to be the poor but responsible daughter, all to protect them from the consequences of my father's failure, all to prevent them from doing exactly what they had just done, squander their assets. And what did I get for it? A text message demanding I continue to pay for the privilege of my own humiliation. I stood up from the floor, my knees cracking. The anger was so cold, so pure, it felt like strength. They thought I was the family charity case. They had no idea I was the family bank, and the bank was about to call in their loan. I walked over to my desk, turned on the lamp, and picked up my personal laptop, not the one I used for the nonprofit. I opened my secure contacts list and dialed a number. It rang twice. "Price, you're working late?" A smooth, professional voice came through the line. "Miss Washington, for you, I'm always working. What's the situation?" Price was a 50-year-old financial attorney, sharp, silver-haired, and impeccably dressed, a white lawyer from one of the oldest firms in Atlanta. He was the only person on earth who knew the full truth about Cascade Holdings. I'd hired him 8 years ago when my algorithm started generating serious money, and he'd been my firewall ever since. "It's time, Price," I said, my voice steady. They made their move. "Tell me." "My parents have officially transferred the property deed on the Atlanta house to my sister, Danielle Miller. They did so without notifying the lender." I heard the faint sound of typing on his end. "And the lender, of course, is Cascade Holdings." "Exactly," I said. "That's a direct breach of the due on sale clause in the mortgage agreement, isn't it?" "It is indeed, Miss Washington." Price's voice was almost cheerful. He loved this part. "It's a flagrant violation. Legally, we are now entitled to accelerate the loan. We can demand payment of the entire outstanding principal immediately." "And what's that total again?" "With the final balloon payment, it's just over $250,000. I thought about their faces, their shock, their disbelief. "Do you think they have any idea?" Price actually chuckled. "Almost certainly not. They think they're just shuffling family paper. They think the bank is some faceless entity in Switzerland they can ignore. They have no idea they've just handed us the keys to the kingdom. They've legally defaulted on their loan from you." "Good," I said. "I want them to know they've defaulted, but I don't want them to know it's me. Not yet." A simple notice of acceleration, then, from Cascade Holdings, citing the breach, demanding full payment within 30 days, or foreclosure proceedings will begin. Yes, send it to my parents and send a separate copy to the new owner, Danielle Miller, and her husband, Chad. Consider it done. It will be sent by certified mail and email first thing in the morning. Thank you, Price. My pleasure, Serena. Truly. I hung up the phone. I looked back at my mother's text message still glowing on my own phone screen. "Don't let the bank call, okay?" My fingers moved quickly across the keyboard. I didn't have to be the responsible daughter. I didn't have to be the bigger person. I just had to be the owner. I typed my reply. "Ask the owner. I'm not paying anymore." I hit send. I watched the little delivered icon appear beneath the message. Then I sent one more text, this one to Price. "Send the notice." I turned my phone completely off, silencing the incoming storm. I walked into my kitchen, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat in the dark. The silence in my apartment was heavy, but it was the silence of a hammer pulled back right before it strikes. The next 2 days were almost peaceful. I turned my phone back on, but only for work. I went to my office at the housing advocacy nonprofit, the place my family dismissed as my little charity project. The irony was almost too much. I spent my mornings counseling families in the West End, families just like mine had been 10 years ago, families facing foreclosure from predatory lenders. I showed them legal loopholes. I connected them with resources. I fought for them. My colleague Maya, a kind woman of 40 with warm eyes and a no-nonsense attitude, stopped by my desk. "You look tired, Serena. Everything okay? That family dinner on Sunday looked like it took a lot out of you." I just smiled, sipping my coffee. "Everything's fine, Maya. Just doing some long overdue house cleaning, getting rid of some old trash that's been piling up." Maya nodded, though she looked confused. "Well, let me know if you need anything. You do good work here, girl. Don't let anyone tell you different." I appreciated her words more than she knew. The storm broke Tuesday afternoon. I was in a budget meeting with the board of directors, presenting my 5-year grant proposal. My phone was on the table, face down, on silent. Halfway through my presentation, it started to vibrate. It wasn't a single buzz. It was a relentless, frantic series of vibrations. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Pause. Buzz, buzz, buzz. It vibrated so hard it skittered across the polished oak table. The board members politely pretended not to notice. I kept my voice perfectly even, never breaking eye contact, finishing my presentation. "Thank you, Serena. Excellent work," our director said. As soon as the applause died down, I excused myself and stepped into the quiet hallway. I looked at my screen. It was a war zone. 17 missed calls, 22 text messages, all from Mom, Dad, and Danielle. My heart wasn't pounding. It was cold. I calmly pressed the voicemail icon. The first message was from my mother. Her voice wasn't warm or worried. It was sharp, annoyed. "Serena, are you getting these messages? Why aren't you answering? Your father just got a very strange email from some company, Cascade Holdings. They're saying the mortgage payment is late. Serena, what did you do? Did you forget to pay? After we were so generous giving the house to Danielle, the least you could do is make the payment on time. You're stressing your father out. Fix it." I scoffed out loud. I forgot. I deleted the message and played the next one, Danielle. It wasn't even words at first, just hysterical gulping sobs. "Serena, what the hell did you do?" she shrieked. I thought you were paying it. Chad and I, we were at Pottery Barn. We were picking out new furniture for the living room, and he got the email too. He said if we don't get this house, he doesn't know if this is going to work. He's going to leave me. Serena, he's going to leave me because of you." I felt a strange, cold calm. I felt nothing for her tears. They were just noise. I deleted the message. I played the last one, the most recent, my father. His voice was unrecognizable. The booming, confident patriarch was gone, replaced by the high-pitched panic of a trapped animal. "Serena, pick up the phone. Call me back right now. This Cascade company, they're not just saying it's late. They sent another notice. They're talking about foreclosure in 24 hours. They're calling the entire loan. I don't know what kind of sick game you're playing, but you stop it. You stop it right now. Call them off. Tell them it's a mistake. You're ruining us. You're ruining me." I stood there in the sterile hallway of my office, the place I came to every day to save people's homes. I listened to his frantic plea a second time. "Call them off. Stop this joke." I took a slow, deep breath. I pressed delete on my father's message. "A joke?" I whispered to the empty hallway. "I haven't even started." I walked back into my office, the echo of my father's panicked voice still in my head. I sat down at my desk, my hands perfectly steady. They thought this was a game. They thought they could scream at me and I would obediently fix the problem I created. They still thought I was the 22-year-old girl they had manipulated into signing those papers. They had no idea who I had become in the 10 years they chose not to see me. I picked up my desk phone and dialed Price. He answered immediately. "Ms. Washington, I trust you've heard from the family." "I have," I said. "They're hysterical, but they're panicking about the wrong thing. They think I missed a payment. They're demanding I call the bank and smooth things over before they get a late fee." I heard Price chuckle. A dry, papery sound. They're still missing the point, aren't they? The breach isn't the late payment. The breach is the illegal property transfer. Exactly, I said. They think they can bully me into paying the $280. They have no idea they've triggered the $250,000 clause. They still think this is a joke. I want them to let them know very clearly that this is not a joke. I want them to understand what they've done. I understand perfectly, Miss Washington. They think they're dealing with their daughter. It's time to remind them they're dealing with their creditor. I will draft the notice of acceleration immediately. Send it to everyone, Price. Certified mail, emails. I want Marcus, Brenda, Danielle, and especially Chad to see it. Consider it done. They should receive the emails by end of day. The certified letters will arrive tomorrow. I hung up the phone. Price was efficient. He was a shark. And right now, I was grateful for it. He wasn't just sending an email. He was launching a legal torpedo. The next morning, I went to work. I sat in meetings. I helped 3 families renegotiate their loans, saving their homes. And I waited. The certified mail receipts hit my inbox on Thursday morning. They had all signed for them. Marcus, Brenda, Danielle, Chad. They had all held the thick, creamy envelope in their hands. They had all read the demand. I waited. The silence was heavier this time. No frantic voicemails, no panicked texts, just dead, cold silence. They were finally beginning to understand. At 4 p.m., my phone lit up. It wasn't a call. It was a text message from a number I didn't recognize, but I knew exactly who it was. Chad. It was the first time he had ever texted me. The message was only one sentence. A message that confirmed they finally understood the gravity of their mistake. It read, "You stupid bitch, do you know what you've done?" I looked at his words. I thought about my sister's tears, my father's rage, my mother's demands, and I smiled. "Yes," I whispered to my empty apartment, "I absolutely do." That text from Chad was the signal. I knew they wouldn't just call, they wouldn't just text, they would come. They were cornered animals now, and they would come to the source. I went to my fridge and poured a tall glass of water. I sat on my sofa in the quiet of my apartment, and I waited. It took them 45 minutes. The pounding on my door wasn't a knock, it was an assault. Boom, 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 as if they intended to break the door down. I heard my mother's voice, high and shrill. "Serena, open this door. Open it right now. We know you're in there." I took a slow sip of water. I walked calmly to the door. I didn't open it. Instead, I looked through the peephole. All 4 of them were crammed in the narrow hallway. My father, his face purple with rage. My mother, her makeup streaked with tears. Danielle, hiding behind Chad, looking terrified. And Chad, his arms crossed, trying to look imposing, but just looking like a cornered bully. I slowly undid the deadbolt and opened the door, but only as far as the security chain would allow, a 6-inch gap. That was all they deserved. They surged forward, only to be stopped by the clink of the metal chain. My father put his face right in the opening, his eyes bloodshot. "What the hell did you do?" he roared, spittle flying from his mouth. "You call that investment fund or whatever it is. You call them right now. You're the only one who's ever talked to them. You tell them to stop this. You tell them it was a mistake." "Serena, baby, please." My mother shoved my father aside, her face appearing in the gap. She was in full manipulative victim mode. "You're trying to make us homeless. Is that what you want? You can't do this to your family. You can't do this to your sister. She just got married. She deserves a good start." "Deserves," I repeated, my voice quiet. "That's a popular word in this family." "Look, Serena," Chad pushed my mother out of the way, his voice low and condescending, trying to sound reasonable. "I don't know what kind of little game you're playing. Maybe you're trying to get attention. But I work in finance. I know how these hard money lenders operate. They're not your friends. They don't play around. You've kicked a hornet's nest you can't control. Now you need to be a big girl, pick up the phone, and tell them this was all a misunderstanding. Tell them you're going to keep making the payments." He smirked as if he had just solved the entire problem for me, the poor, dumb girl who worked at a nonprofit. I looked at him. I held his gaze through the 6-inch gap. You work in finance? I asked, my voice genuinely curious. That's right, he said, puffing out his chest, associate vice president at... And in your professional financial opinion, I interrupted, did you ever advise your wife, the new property owner, to read the mortgage contract, specifically the due on sale clause? It's pretty standard. Clause 17A. It states that if the property title is transferred without the lender's written consent, the lender has the right to accelerate the loan. That's not a game, Chad. That's a contract. It's a basic financial error. Surprising an associate vice president would miss it. Chad's face went blank. The arrogant smirk just dissolved. He had no idea what I was talking about. He had just walked his wife and his in-laws straight into a legal bear trap. Danielle, sensing his confidence vanish, started to wail. Why won't you just call them, Serena? Why are you doing this to me? Are you that jealous? You're just jealous of me and Chad. You're trying to ruin my life. My father found his voice again, shaking with rage. Enough of this. You call them now. I looked at all four of their desperate, angry faces. I looked at the family that had disowned me while still expecting me to pay their bills. I can't, I said simply. What do you mean you can't? My father bellowed. Why not? Danielle shrieked. I leaned forward, my face close to the opening. I looked past my parents, past my sister, and I looked right into Chad's pale, terrified eyes. I can't call them, I said, my voice dropping to a calm, clear whisper, because I am Cascade Holdings. There was a beat of pure, dead silence in the hallway. The four of them just stared at me through the gap. The air crackled. Then Chad laughed. It wasn't a normal laugh. It was a high-pitched, incredulous bark. You are Cascade Holdings? Don't be ridiculous, Serena. He turned to my parents, scoffing. She's losing it. She's delusional. He looked back at me, his confidence returning. You work in a broke-ass nonprofit. Your salary probably doesn't even cover the interest on that loan, let alone the principal. You're the lender? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Serena, this isn't funny, my father roared, his fist hitting the doorframe. You stop lying. This isn't the time for games. You tell us who these people are. I didn't say a word. I just held their gazes. Then I turned, walked calmly to the small table in my entryway where I had left the file, and picked it up. I walked back to the door. You're the finance expert, Chad, I said, my voice flat. You should be able to make sense of this. I pushed a thick file folder through the 6-inch gap. Read it. Chad looked at the folder like it was a bomb. My father, impatient and angry, ripped it from my hand. He tore it open, his hands shaking with rage. The rest of them crowded around, peering over his shoulder. I watched their faces as he started to read. I watched my father's eyes scan the first page. It was the Articles of Organization for Cascade Holdings, LLC, filed with the Delaware Secretary of State, dated October 2015. I watched his expression falter as he read the next page. Sole member and owner, Serena Washington. I saw it at the same time. His mouth fell open. No, that's impossible. That has to be fake. Keep reading, Dad, I said, my voice like ice. He flipped the page, his breath hitched. It was the loan acquisition contract, a binding contract between Cascade Holdings, LLC, and Bank of America, transferring the entire mortgage portfolio to 1250 Oakwood Drive. And at the bottom, his own signature, Marcus Washington, acknowledging the transfer of his debt to the new mysterious lender 10 years ago, a lender he never bothered to investigate because he assumed I was handling it. My father went pale, utterly, deathly pale. The paper slipped from his nerveless fingers, scattering across the hallway floor. My mother saw the look on his face, and she knew. She knew it was true. Marcus, she whispered. He didn't answer. He just stared at the name Serena Washington on the legal document at his feet. Brenda let out a sound, a wounded, strangled gasp, and her legs gave out. She physically crumpled to the floor of the hallway with her hands covering her face. Oh my God! Oh my God! Only Danielle reacted with anger, her face twisted, not in shame, but in outrage. You lied? She shrieked at me. You've had money this whole time? You've been rich and you've been hiding it from us? Her accusation was so perfectly, selfishly Danielle that my last remaining shred of pity evaporated. Hiding it? I said, my voice sharp for the first time. I saved this family. I saved that house 10 years ago when Dad's mismanagement almost put you all on the street. I used my own money I earned to keep a roof over your head. I did it while living in this apartment, driving a 10-year-old car, and working a job you all look down on. I paid for the very house that Mom and Dad just gave to you for free, right after telling me I wasn't worthy of it. So you tell me, Danielle, who exactly lied to who? No one had an answer. There was just the sound of my mother's quiet sobbing on the floor and my father's ragged breathing. I looked at all four of them one last time. The bully, the golden child, the enabler, and the failure. My family. 30 days, I said. The clock is ticking. And with that, I unhooked the chain, closed the door, and shot the deadbolt home. The sound of it sliding into place was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. I stood in my silent apartment, the sound of the deadbolt locking still echoing in my ears. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a cold, clear calm. I walked over to my desk and sat down, picking up the file for Cascade Holdings. My father's shocked, pale face flashed in my mind. He thought he knew me. They all thought they knew me. They thought I was Serena, the quiet, dutiful, slightly disappointing daughter who worked for a nonprofit for $45,000 a year. My eyes drifted to the framed photo on my desk. It was from my college graduation. I was smiling, holding my diploma. My father stood next to me, his arm around me, but he looked strained. My mother was next to him, her smile tight. This was taken just 3 months before his life fell apart. I remembered that time in painful detail. It wasn't just a layoff, as they'd told everyone, including Danielle. It was a humiliating, career-ending firing. My father, Marcus Washington, a senior vice president at a major Atlanta bank, had been caught making wildly speculative investments with client funds. He'd lost millions. He was just on the right side of the law to avoid prosecution, but his career was over. The shame of it, the humiliation of being escorted out of his office, had broken him. That was the man who had come to me, his 22-year-old daughter, begging me to save the family home. He wasn't just broke, he was a disgrace. And that was why I'd hidden my money, not to be deceptive, but to be safe. I knew then that my father could not be trusted with money. I knew my mother's love was tied to financial security. I knew Danielle would bleed a stone dry. My little non-profit job, as they called it, wasn't just a charity case. I was a senior data analyst for a financial fraud advocacy group. My job, the one they pitied me for, was to hunt predators just like my father had almost become. I had access to vast, complex data sets on mortgage fraud, shell corporations, and predatory lending schemes. My work wasn't just helping people, it was protecting people using the one thing I was truly brilliant at: data. That algorithm I sold for $150,000, that was just the prototype. In the 10 years since, working in the trenches of financial crime, I had refined it. I had fed it a decade's worth of real-world data. It was no longer just a college project. It was one of the most sophisticated risk analysis tools on the private market. Cascade Holdings wasn't just a name on a piece of paper, it was my fortress. My real job, the one that paid the bills, was licensing that algorithm. My nonprofit salary was a rounding error. My real income, the money that came in from secret licensing deals with private equity firms in Zurich and hedge funds in New York, was over $2 million a year, tax-free, routed through my Delaware corporation. I lived in a one-bedroom apartment, I drove a 10-year-old car, I wore simple clothes because I had seen what the pursuit of wealth had done to my father. I had seen how my mother's and sister's personalities were built entirely around displaying wealth. I found it all disgusting. I lived simply because I wanted to. I had nothing to prove to them, until night. I looked at the scattered legal papers on my floor from the hallway. I thought of Chad, his smirking, arrogant face. I work in finance. The condescending way he'd spoken to me, the way he had so easily slotted into my family's toxic dynamic. I turned to my secure workstation, the one that ran my algorithm. The interface glowed in the dim light. They thought Cascade Holdings was my secret. They didn't even know what my real weapon was. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. This tool wasn't just for predicting market trends. It was for finding fraud, for finding the rot beneath the surface. I opened a new query, and in the search bar, I typed a name: Chad Miller. I knew the silence wouldn't last. The shock would wear off and be replaced with desperation, and desperation always leads to new tactics. The next day, I got a text from Danielle. Not a string of insults, not a panicked voicemail, just a simple, "Can we please talk? Just me and Chad. We'll meet you anywhere. Please, sissy." I agreed to meet them at a busy public coffee shop in Midtown. Not my neighborhood, not theirs. Neutral territory. I chose a small table in the corner and ordered a black coffee. I was waiting for them. They walked in, and the change in their demeanor was almost comical. Chad wasn't smirking. Danielle wasn't pouting. They looked humble, or at least they were trying to. Chad was holding Danielle's hand, guiding her through the tables as if she were a fragile doll. "Serena?" Chad said, his voice low and incredibly, disgustingly sincere. He slid into the seat opposite me, pulling Danielle down next to him. "Thank you for meeting us." I just nodded, sipping my coffee. "Look," he leaned forward, clasping his hands on the table. "Last night we were all emotional. Things were said, but I gotta tell you, Serena, I'm just blown away." He shook his head as if in admiration. "You, Cascade Holdings, you're a genius, a bona fide genius. We had no idea." I just stared at him. "Get to the point, Chad." "The point is," he said, smiling, trying to make it us against the world, "the point is we're family, right? And you're obviously brilliant. You've done so well for yourself. And Danielle and I, we're just starting out." Danielle, right on cue, put her hand on my arm. Her eyes were wide and pleading. "Please, we were so wrong. I was so wrong. But hey, you're rich, aren't you? All this time you've been rich. Why do you still live in that tiny apartment? Why do you drive that old car?" She looked genuinely baffled. "You have all this money and you let us treat you like that? I don't care about money, Danielle. You know that. Or maybe you don't." "But we do," she blurted out, then quickly corrected herself. "I mean, we need it. Chad is trying so hard, and we're family. You're my big sister. Please, Serena, you can just make it go away, right? The debt, just erase it. Call it a wedding present, please." She squeezed my arm, her nails digging in slightly. The desperation was real now, rolling off both of them in waves. Chad was watching me, his eyes gleaming with a hopeful, greedy light. I looked at Danielle's pleading face. Then I looked at Chad, the finance expert, who was now begging his broke sister-in-law to erase a $250,000 debt. And I laughed. It wasn't a nice laugh. It was cold and sharp. Both of them flinched. "A wedding present?" I said. "You want my help?" I turned my full attention to Chad. His smile wavered. "Help you with what, Chad? Help you cover your tracks?" His face froze. "What? What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the $1.2 million, Chad," I said, my voice dropping low, cutting through the coffee shop buzz. "The $1.2 million of your client's money, the money you invested in that crypto scheme. What was it called? Oh, right, Apex Digital Reserve, the one that went belly up last week." Chad's face went from pale to gray. He looked like he was going to be sick. He wasn't just a bad investor. He was a thief. "How?" he whispered, his voice catching. "How did you—" "You forgot what I do for a living, Chad?" I said. "Both of my jobs. My nonprofit job, we hunt predators. We see this kind of affinity fraud every single day. And my other job, my algorithm, it's not just for mortgages. It's a risk analysis tool. It flags irregularities. And you, Chad, you are one giant walking irregularity." I leaned in, savoring the moment of his complete unmasking. The algorithm flagged your trades 30 seconds after I typed in your name. You've been defrauding your clients. You've been lying to your firm. You haven't just lost their money, Chad. You've stolen it. You're not just broke. You're about to be indicted. You are ruined. And you had the audacity to come here with my sister and ask me for a handout, trying to drag my entire family down with you? I sat back, sipping my coffee. Danielle was looking back and forth between us, her face a mask of confusion. The color had drained from her face. Chad, what is she talking about? Indicted? What $1.2 million? You told me your bonus was coming. You told me we were rich. Chad couldn't speak. He just stared at me, his eyes wide with pure animal terror. Danielle's voice rose, cracking. Chad, you lied to me. The coffee shop was silent for a long moment, save for the hiss of the espresso machine. Danielle just stared at Chad, her mouth open, the words, "You lied to me," hanging in the air like a bad smell. Chad couldn't look at her. He couldn't look at me. He just stared at the table, his face the color of wet cement. He was completely and totally broken. He gave a single pathetic nod. Danielle let out a wail that made people at the other end of the coffee shop look over. It wasn't a cry of grief. It was a tantrum. "You told me you were rich!" she screamed at him. She grabbed her purse and scrambled out of the booth, running out of the coffee shop, leaving him sitting there alone. Chad didn't follow her. He just sat there. I finished my coffee, stood up, and left him to his fate. The smear campaign began in earnest. My mother, Brenda, was a master of the narrative. If she couldn't control me with guilt, she would try to control everyone else with lies. My phone started ringing from numbers I hadn't heard from in months. The first call was my Aunt Janine, my mother's sister. "Serena, honey," her voice dripped with syrupy, fake concern. "I just got off the phone with your mother, baby. What in the world are you doing? She is an absolute wreck. She says you found some money and it's just turned you cold. She says you're trying to evict them. Evict them from their own home? Serena, your father is sick with worry." I tried to explain. "Aunt Janine, that's not what's happening. They gave the house to Danielle and—" "Blood is blood, Serena," she cut me off, her voice suddenly hard. "I don't know what kind of fight you're having, but you do not put your parents out on the street. Not after everything they've done for you. Your mother is a good woman, and she is heartbroken. You need to fix this. You need to apologize." She hung up before I could say another word. Then came the texts. My Uncle David. "Marcus is a proud man. For you to shame him like this is a sin." A cousin I hadn't seen in 5 years. "Heard you're a millionaire now. Guess you're too good for the family that raised you?" The masterstroke was the email from their pastor. Pastor Brown wrote that my parents had come to him in great spiritual distress, and he was deeply concerned about my hardening heart and that I had lost my way. He wanted me to come in for a family counseling session to find a path back to forgiveness and familial duty. They were painting a masterpiece of deception. The story was simple and effective. Serena, the quiet, ungrateful daughter, had secretly become wealthy, and the first thing she did with her money was become a monster, colluding with a ruthless bank named Cascade to evict her loving parents and destroy her younger sister out of pure, bitter jealousy. They conveniently forgot to mention that Cascade was me. I sat there, my phone buzzing with the anger of relatives who had never once called to ask me how I was doing. I was exhausted. I had spent 10 years building a fortress of financial independence, only to realize that the war wasn't about money, it was about reputation. And in that arena, my mother was a general. I couldn't fight this in the shadows. Ignoring it would just let their lies take root. They were dragging my name through the mud, poisoning every well, turning my entire community against me. I picked up the phone and called Price. "Price, it's worse than I thought. They're not just desperate, they've launched a full-scale smear campaign." I explained the calls, the texts, the pastor. They're painting me as the heartless millionaire attacking their poor, loving family. They're making me the predator. Price was silent for a moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold.
It's a classic desperate move, Ms. Washington. They have no legal standing, so they're resorting to character assassination. It's working, I said, feeling tired. They're trying to shame me into backing down. They want to make this as public and as painful as possible. So what do you want to do? We can send a few warning letters. No, I said, a new resolve hardening in my voice.
No more letters. They want a public drama. They want an audience to hear their side of the story. They want a show. Fine, we'll give them a show. We'll give them the biggest show they've ever seen. It's time to set the stage for the final act. I let the smear campaign rage for another 24 hours. I let them poison the well. I let them call me a monster, an ungrateful daughter, a jealous sister. I let them get comfortable in their lies. Then, on Friday morning, I acted. I didn't reply to Aunt Janine's self-righteous text. I didn't return Uncle David's angry voicemail. I certainly didn't respond to Pastor Brown's offer of counseling. Instead, I opened a new email. My fingers were steady on the keyboard. I was done playing defense. I was setting a trap, and I was baiting it with the one thing they couldn't resist: the truth, presented on my terms. The email was simple, formal, and professional. The subject line read, "Family meeting regarding 1250 Oakwood Drive and associated finances." I sent it to a very specific list: Marcus Washington, Brenda Washington, Danielle Miller, Aunt Janine, Uncle David, and, for good measure, Pastor Brown, the entire smear campaign committee. The body of the email read, "To my concerned family. It has come to my attention that there is a significant amount of misinformation and conjecture currently circulating regarding my relationship with my parents and the financial status of the family home. The situation is far more complex than it has been portrayed. In the interest of full transparency and to clear up any and all confusion once and for all, I am inviting you to a formal family meeting. The meeting will be held this Saturday, November 19th at 10 in the morning. It will take place in the main conference room at the offices of my legal counsel, Price and Associates. I will be present along with my attorney. I will have all relevant financial records, contracts, and correspondence from the past 10 years available for your review. I am prepared to present the entire unvarnished truth of this matter from the beginning. If you are all as truly concerned about the truth and the well-being of this family as your recent messages suggest, I trust you will make it a priority to be there. Please RSVP by end of day." I signed it simply, Serena. I hit send, and I waited. Saturday morning, 10 a.m. sharp. The conference room at Price and Associates was on the 40th floor, overlooking all of Atlanta. It was a room designed to intimidate. A single, massive, polished mahogany table reflected the gray morning light. The chairs were high-backed black leather. The air was cold and smelled faintly of wood polish and money. This was not a living room. This was a boardroom. They arrived together, as I knew they would, a little posse of indignation. My father, Marcus, walked in first, trying to look imposing in his best suit, but he just looked stiff and uncomfortable. My mother, Brenda, followed, her eyes red-rimmed, but her expression hard and defiant. She was wearing her Sunday best, as if going to church. Aunt Janine was with her, clutching her purse like a shield, her face set in a mask of, "I'm just here for support," self-righteousness. And then there was Danielle. She trailed behind them, pale and hollow-eyed. She wasn't wearing designer clothes, just a simple black dress. She looked lost. She wouldn't look at me. Chad was nowhere to be seen. They all filed in and sat on one side of the massive table, clustering together, a clear us against her formation. On the other side sat my team. My lawyer, Price, was at the head of the table, his silver gray hair perfectly in place. He wore a crisp white shirt and a simple dark tie. He looked bored, which made him even more intimidating. I sat to his right in a simple navy blue dress, my hands folded calmly on a legal pad. And to my left sat Maya, my colleague from the nonprofit. She was dressed professionally, holding a notepad and pen, her expression kind but unreadable. My family stared at Maya. They didn't know who she was. Aunt Janine probably assumed she was a secretary there to take notes. They dismissed her, just as they had always dismissed my entire professional life. They had no idea why she was really there. The silence in the room stretched for a full minute. The only sound was the quiet hum of the air conditioning. My father couldn't stand it. He needed to be in charge. He cleared his throat, his voice booming too loudly in the soundproofed room. "All right, Serena, you got us all down here. You called this ridiculous meeting. What do you want? You want a grandstand? You want a public apology? Because let me tell you right now, your mother and I are not going to—" "Good morning, Mr. Washington." Price's voice cut through my father's tirade like a scalpel. It wasn't loud, but it had a weight that stopped my father cold. His mouth snapped shut. Price didn't even look up from his papers. He slowly, methodically put on a pair of reading glasses. "Thank you all for coming. Let's establish the ground rules, shall we?" He looked up, his gaze sweeping over each of them. "This is not a family argument. This is not a negotiation, and you are not in charge here. This is a formal presentation of information requested by my client, Miss Washington, to correct a significant and damaging campaign of misinformation." He looked directly at Aunt Janine and my mother. "You are here as guests in a private law office. You will be civil. You will not interrupt. You will listen. After Miss Washington has presented the facts, you will be free to leave. Is that clear?" Aunt Janine opened her mouth and then closed it. My father's face was turning a dangerous shade of red, but for the first time in his life, he was in a room where his anger meant nothing. The power dynamic had shifted so completely, it had given them all vertigo. They weren't in their living room anymore. My mother, trying to regain some control, just sniffed. "This is absurd. She's our daughter." "She is my client," Price said, his voice final. He looked at me. I gave him a single, slight nod. "Excellent," Price said. He picked up a small remote from the table. He aimed the remote at the far wall. With a quiet click, a large screen descended from the ceiling. A projector whirred to life, flooding the wall with a bright white light. The first slide clicked into place, its title in bold black letters that no one could ignore. "The Financial History of Marcus and Brenda Washington, 2015 to present." The first slide titled Financial State, Marcus Washington, 2015. And right below it was a scanned document from Bank of America. It was a formal notice of intent to foreclose on 1250 Oakwood Drive and associated finances. A collective gasp came from my family side of the table. Aunt Janine leaned forward, squinting. "What? What is that?" "That," Price said, his voice echoing in the quiet room, "is the foreclosure notice my client's parents received in October of 2015. They were 3 months delinquent on their mortgage payments." Mr. Washington, having been recently terminated from his position for financial mismanagement, had no income. They were, to put it plainly, about to be homeless in 2 weeks. I watched my father's face, the red color drained from it, replaced by a pasty, sick gray. This was his deepest shame, the failure he had buried for a decade, now projected onto a 10-foot wall for his family to see. Aunt Janine looked at my mother. "Brenda, what is he talking about? You told me Marcus took a severance package. You told me you were fine." My mother's lips thinned. "We handled it. It was a private family matter." "Exactly," Price said, and clicked to the next slide. It was handled. The slide was titled Cascade Holdings, LLC, Incorporation and Acquisition. On the left, the Articles of Organization from the state of Delaware, with my name, Serena Washington, clearly listed as the sole member. On the right, the executed loan purchase agreement between Bank of America and Cascade Holdings. Aunt Janine's jaw literally dropped. "Serena, you bought their—" She turned on my mother, her voice no longer supportive but sharp and accusing. "Brenda, what is this? You said she was colluding with some foreign bank. You said they were predators. That's her name." My mother's defiant composure finally cracked. She shot to her feet, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "She tricked us. She lied to us. She had money and she never told us." "Please sit down, Mrs. Washington," Price commanded. "We are not finished." My father, looking utterly defeated, pulled her back into her chair. "Brenda, shut up. Just shut up." Price clicked to the next slide. The payment ledger. 2015 to 2025. The screen filled with a massive spreadsheet, 10 years of data, 12 months per year, 120 payments, each one documented. Date, November 1, 2015. Amount, $2,800. Source, Cascade Holdings. As you can see, Price narrated, Cascade Holdings, my client, has faithfully managed this loan for 120 months. Never a late payment, never a single default, keeping this family in this home. He then used his laser pointer to highlight several lines scattered throughout the years, all colored in red. These red lines are particularly interesting. These are months where Mr. and Mrs. Washington's payment to Cascade was delayed. You will see here, on these dates, a corresponding transfer from Ms. Washington's personal savings account, the one attached to her nonprofit salary, into the Cascade account to cover the payment, so the loan would never be, not even technically, in default. He highlighted one. December 2018, Christmas. They forgot to make their payment. Ms. Washington covered it. May 2020, they bought a new patio set. Ms. Washington covered it. August 2022, they paid for Danielle's second wedding reception. Ms. Washington covered it. The room was dead silent. Aunt Janine looked at my mother. Her face was a mask of disbelief. Brenda, you told me you were paying her rent. You told me she was struggling. You told me you had paid off this house years ago. Brenda's face was white. She was trapped. All her lies were on a spreadsheet. It doesn't matter, she finally exploded, her voice a desperate shriek. So she paid. So what? She's my daughter. Her money is my money. It's what she's supposed to do. A daughter is supposed to take care of her family. All eyes turned to me. I hadn't spoken a word. I just sat there, watching her. Finally, I leaned forward, my voice quiet but carrying across the table. Then why, Mom? I asked. If my money was always your money, why was my career never a real career? Why was my life never a real life? You only claim my success when you need to cash the check. You only claim me when you need something. My mother's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. She had no answer. The screen went blank, then lit up again with the next slide. Price's voice cut through the tension. Which brings us, he said, to the present. Part 2, the future of the property. Price clicked the remote. The screen went blank, and the projector whirred into silence. He took off his glasses, polished them slowly, and looked at my father. That, he said, brings us to the legal reality. The 30-day notice for payment in full expired yesterday at 5 p.m. As of this morning, Cascade Holdings is legally entitled to begin foreclosure proceedings and seize the property. My mother let out a small, terrified squeak. Aunt Janine looked like she was going to faint. I spoke for the second time, my voice cutting through the heavy silence. The 30-day deadline is over, I confirmed, looking at each of them. The foreclosure will proceed. This was the moment the reality finally landed. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't a game. It wasn't a family discussion. It was a legal execution. No! Danielle screamed, lunging forward, her hands hitting the table. No, you can't, Serena, please. Where will we live? Where will I go? He's gone. Chad is gone. I have nothing. You can't take the house, please. Brenda was openly sobbing now, her hands clutched to her chest. You can't do this, Serena. We are your family. Your family. You would make your own mother and father homeless. After everything we did for you, you are a monster, a cold, heartless monster. My father Marcus, his face a mask of purple rage, finally exploded. He stood up, pointing his finger at me, shaking. You do this and you are no daughter of mine. You hear me? You are dead to me. When I die, you won't get a cent. You won't get this, nothing. You will be written out of the will. You will get nothing. His threat, the one that was supposed to be his ultimate weapon, hung in the air. I looked at him, at his contorted, angry face, and I laughed. It was a quiet, sad laugh. Dad, I said, I'm a billionaire. The word hung in the room, sucking all the air out. Aunt Janine's mouth was wide open. Danielle stopped crying, her face just a mask of stupid shock. My father's arm fell to his side. My algorithm is licensed by half the hedge funds in the Northern Hemisphere. I don't need your money. I never did. The $45,000 I made at the nonprofit was just what I paid myself for my day job. My real work, you never even bothered to ask about it. I let that sink in. I didn't do this for money, Dad. I did it for respect. The respect you gave to Chad in 5 minutes, but never gave to me in 32 years. I stood up, which is why I've made my decision. I looked at all of them, their desperate, broken faces. I am not foreclosing on the house. The collective sigh in the room was so loud it was almost a gasp. My mother looked up, her tears instantly stopping. What? I am not foreclosing, I repeated, and I am forgiving the entire $250,000 debt. As of this moment, the house is paid for in full. It's yours, free and clear. The whiplash of relief was immediate. My father stumbled back into his chair, his hand over his heart. Danielle just stared, not comprehending, and my mother's face transformed in an instant. The tears, the anger, the victimhood all vanished, replaced by a radiant, triumphant smile. "Oh, Serena," she cried, her voice suddenly warm and loving. "Oh, baby, I knew it. I knew you wouldn't do it. I knew you were a good daughter. I told them, Marcus. Didn't I tell you? She's a good girl. She always was." She rushed from her side of the table, her arms outstretched, coming around to embrace me in a victorious hug, ready to play the role of the loving mother who had won. I didn't move. I just raised my hand, palm out, stopping her cold. She froze, her arms still in the air, a confused, loving smile still plastered on her face. "I'm not finished," I said. Her smile faltered. "The house is yours," I said, my voice like steel. "But it comes with one non-negotiable condition. It's the last thing you will ever receive from me." I looked at my mother, my father, my sister. "I am placing my entire estate, all of it, into an irrevocable trust, and as of this moment, not a single person in this room will ever receive another cent from me. Not for a car repair, not for a medical bill, not for a Christmas present. Nothing. You wanted the house, you got it, but you don't get me. Ever again. You are cut off." My mother was still frozen, her arms halfway in an embrace, her face a mask of confusion. The triumphant smile was gone, replaced by a slack-jawed, uncomprehending stare. My father was the first one to understand the fine print. His face, which had been relieved just a second ago, darkened. "Wait," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "What do you mean, cut off? You forgive the house, but you disown us?" "Disown?" I repeated, looking at him. "No, Dad. You did that. You did that last Sunday when you announced that Danielle deserved the family home, and I was just an afterthought. You and Mom have been telling me my whole life in 1,000 different ways that I wasn't really part of this family, that I was the ATM, the responsible one, the backup plan. You just finally said it out loud." I turned to my mother. "I'm just agreeing with you, Mom. My money is not your money. It never was. It was mine, and I let you use it to keep a roof over your head. But the ATM is closed. For good. I'm giving you the house. It's worth about $400,000 in this market. It's paid in full. Consider it a final severance payment for 32 years of services rendered. It is the last dollar you will ever get from me." The finality of it hit them. This wasn't a victory. It was an amputation. Aunt Janine just sat there silent, her judgment finally gone, replaced by pure shock. But Danielle? Danielle finally understood. The house was safe, but her personal piggy bank, me, was gone, and Chad was gone, and his money was never real. She was, for the first time in her life, completely and totally on her own. But what about me?" she suddenly wailed, her voice cracking. "Serena, you can't. You heard what you said.
Chad, he's gone. He's a criminal. I have no money. I don't have a job. What am I supposed to do?" She looked at me, her eyes filled with the pure, naked terror of a golden child who had just realized the gold was fake. She was expecting me to rush in to save her, like I had always been expected to do. I didn't even look at her. I turned my head slightly to the woman sitting next to me, the woman they had all ignored. "Maya," I said, my voice calm and professional, "would you mind speaking with my sister?" Maya, my colleague, the director of our nonprofits outreach program, smiled kindly at Danielle. She opened her notepad. "Of course, Serena." She looked across the table at my sister, who was staring at her in confusion. "Danielle," Maya said, her voice gentle but firm, "I'm Maya. I run the Jobs and Self-Sufficiency program at our organization. I understand you're currently unemployed and will be needing assistance." Danielle just gaped. "What? What are you talking about?" "Serena has already made a donation to sponsor your placement. It's a wonderful 3-month program. We'll help you with basic life skills, resume writing, interview techniques, and we have partnerships with several local businesses that are hiring for entry-level administrative positions. The first class starts next Monday." The humiliation in the room was so thick I could taste it. Danielle, who had laughed at my boring job, who had flaunted her designer bags and her rich husband, was now being offered a charitable entry-level job skills course by her broke older sister. She was being treated like what she was, a charity case. I'm not," Danielle stammered, looking to my mother for help. But my mother was silent, her own world in ashes. Aunt Janine just stared at the table. My father had been silent, his hands clenched on the table. He had watched this whole exchange, his face getting darker and darker. He had lost the house, he had lost control of Nee, and now he was watching his golden child be humiliated. He couldn't take it. He pushed his chair back and stood up, his voice a low growl that filled the conference room. "You think you're clever, don't you?" he said, his eyes fixed on me. "You think you're God, sitting up here in your fancy lawyer's office, handing out charity to your sister, cutting off your own mother." You stalk around the table until he was standing right over me, his face inches from mine, his voice a low growl. He was trying to reclaim his power, to be the patriarch, to frighten me into submission. He thought his anger was his greatest weapon. I didn't flinch. I didn't even lean back. I just looked into his angry, bloodshot eyes. "You're right, Dad," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "My money isn't what makes me powerful. My information is." I paused, letting his threat hang in the air. "And I almost forgot. There's one last piece of information we need to discuss." I gave Price a small nod. Price, who had been watching this exchange with the mild interest of a scientist observing an insect, picked up a final slim folder from the table. "Ah, yes," Price said, his voice cutting through the tension. "While my client was handling her personal real estate portfolio, Cascade Holdings was also busy with its commercial assets." He looked directly at my father. "Mr. Washington, your company, Washington & Sons Manufacturing, has been doing quite well since you started it after your departure from the bank, correct? So well, in fact, that you recently took out a significant business loan for expansion." My father's eyes narrowed. He was confused. "What? What does that have to do with anything? That's my company." "Is it?" Price asked mildly. "You took out a $5 million loan from SunTrust Bank 3 months ago to purchase a new CNC line from a supplier in Germany, correct? To expand your production." "Yes," my father said, his voice wary. "So what? We got the loan. The equipment is arriving next week." "No, it isn't," Price said. He slid a document across the polished table. "SunTrust was very happy to offload your debt. You see, Mr. Washington, your company, Washington & Sons Manufacturing, is handling very badly. Your company is over-leveraged. Your personal guarantee isn't worth what you think it is. SunTrust was looking for a buyer for that debt, and Cascade Holdings was more than happy to oblige." My father stared at the paper. It was another loan acquisition agreement.
Cascade Holdings bought your $5 million business loan last week, Mr. Washington, Price continued, his voice devoid of all emotion. As the new lien holder, we've placed a hold on your equipment at the port in Savannah. That shipment isn't going anywhere, and given your frankly hostile attitude in this meeting, we find ourselves concerned about your stability as a business partner. Price tapped the document. And according to the covenants of this loan, if the lender feels the asset is in jeopardy, the entire $5 million balance is callable, effective immediately. If my father's face was gray before, it was now the color of ash. He stumbled back, his hand grabbing the table to steady himself. He didn't fall into the chair, he collapsed into it. He finally understood. I didn't just own his house, I owned his legacy. I owned his business. I owned him. The man who had called me nothing just seconds ago was now completely and utterly at my mercy. My mother was silent. My aunt was silent. Danielle was silent. This was a level of power they couldn't even comprehend. I stood up, gathering my papers. "You have 30 days, Marcus," I said, using his first name for the first time in my life. 30 days to find $5 million, just like you gave me 30 days for the house. I started to walk away. "Or," I said, pausing at the door, "you can accept my real conditions." I heard a broken sound behind me. "What conditions?" my father whispered, his voice a dry, rattling thing. "What do you want?" I looked down at my father, the man who had loomed over me just moments before, now looked small, his shoulders slumped in his expensive suit. He was a king who had just realized his entire kingdom was owned by someone else. His whisper, "What conditions?" was the sound of total surrender. I didn't answer him right away. I walked back to my side of the table. I looked at Danielle, who was watching me with wide, terrified eyes. "Condition 1, I said, my voice clear and steady. "Danielle, you will accept Maya's offer. You will enroll in the self-sufficiency program. You will attend every class. You will learn how to write a resume, and you will find a job, a real job, one that you get on your own merits. You have 6 months to become financially independent. I will not be your safety net. You will not receive a single dollar from me or from Cascade Holdings. You will learn, for the first time in your life, to stand on your own feet." Danielle just nodded numbly. The fight was gone. Then I turned to my mother. She was watching me, her expression a mixture of fear and resentment. "Condition 2, you and Dad will begin mandatory family therapy with me, with a licensed therapist of my choosing. We are not going to sweep this under the rug. We are not going to pretend this didn't happen. We are going to talk about the last 30 years. We are going to talk about the golden child and the scapegoat. We are going to talk about the lies. And I am going to hear a real, actual apology, not just, 'I'm sorry you feel that way.' I'm going to hear, 'I'm sorry for what I did.' We will continue until I am satisfied that you understand the damage you have caused." My mother's face tightened. She hated the idea, but she looked at my father and she saw they had no choice. She gave a stiff, jerky nod. Finally, I looked at my father. He was just a shell-shocked man now. And condition 3, Washington and Sons Manufacturing, you are going to call an emergency board meeting. At that meeting, you will nominate me to the board of directors, and you will vote yes. He started to protest, a reflex. "But you don't know anything about manufacturing. I don't have to," I said, cutting him off. "I know everything about risk. I know that you are over-leveraged, that your supply chain is a mess, and that you are terrible with money. You are not appointing me because you are my daughter. You are appointing me because I am your $5 million creditor. I am the bank, and the bank is now going to have a seat at the table to protect its investment. I will not let you run my asset into the ground the way you almost did with the last one." I let the terms hang in the air, the total, unconditional surrender of their lives in exchange for the financial ruin I could bring upon them in an instant. I watched my father, the proud patriarch, the man who had dismissed me.
I watched the internal war on his face, the pride, the rage, the humiliation, and finally, the cold, hard reality. He slowly, agonizingly lifted his head. He looked at me, and for the first time, I think he truly saw me. Not my daughter, not his ATM. He saw the person who held all the cards, and in a voice so quiet it was barely audible, he said, "I accept." My aunt just stared at the table. She looked like she wanted to be anywhere else in the world. I nodded once. There was no triumph, no joy, just a cold, quiet ending. I picked up my briefcase. I looked at Price, who was already gathering his files, his expression perfectly neutral. "Maya, thank you for coming," I said. Maya nodded at me, then gave Danielle a business card. "I'll expect you on Monday, Danielle," she said kindly. I walked to the door of the conference room. My family just sat there, a ruined portrait of a family. I opened the door and paused, looking back one last time. "Price will be in touch to finalize the new loan covenants, Marcus, and to schedule our first therapy session, Mom." I stepped out into the hallway. "The presentation," I said to the empty air, "is over."
The weeks that followed were quiet and hard. My father, with no other choice, accepted my terms. The $5 million loan was restructured with Cascade Holdings now holding the reins. My conditions were not suggestions, they were covenants. The therapy sessions were brutal. The first two, my mother just sat there, arms crossed, radiating silent fury. My father just stared at the floor, answering the therapist's questions in monosyllables. It was in the third session that the dam finally broke. The therapist, Dr. Hayes, a sharp woman I respected, asked my mother a simple question. "Brenda, what were you afraid of? What did you think would happen if Serena was successful?" My mother was silent for a long time, and then, for the first time, she looked at me, really looked at me. Her voice was small. "I was jealous." I just stared at her. "You were always so capable," she whispered, the admission tearing out of her. "You were like your father before. You were smart, you were independent, you never needed me, not like Danielle did. I was afraid. I was afraid your father would see you and not see me. I was afraid he would love you more." It wasn't an excuse, but it was the first honest thing she had said to me in 30 years. A few days later, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was a picture of a coffee cup with latte art sitting on a cheap diner counter. The text that followed said, "I got my first paycheck. It's not much, but I earned it. Thank you for not letting me go down with him." It was from Danielle. She had gotten a job as a hostess at a breakfast diner. She had stuck with Maya's program. It was a start. I didn't write back, but I saved the message. The news about Chad broke a week after that. The SEC investigation, which my algorithm had predicted, became public. He was arrested, charged with multiple counts of wire fraud. His face was all over the local Atlanta news. A perp walk in a wrinkled suit. My family didn't even mention his name. He had just vanished. My new life, however, was just beginning. My first board meeting at Washington & Sons Manufacturing was as tense as you'd expect. My father sat at the head of the table, and I sat at the other end. His team of good old boy managers looked at me with open skepticism. I didn't talk about feelings. I didn't talk about the past. I just opened my laptop. "Gentlemen," I said, "I've run a risk analysis on your current supply chain, and the numbers are alarming. Your single-source supplier in Germany is a massive liability. Your debt-to-income ratio is unsustainable, and your cash flow projections are based on imaginary sales figures." I spent the next hour dismantling their entire business model, not with anger, but with cold, hard data. When I was finished, the room was silent. The managers looked at my father, expecting him to defend his legacy. He just sat there, looking at the spreadsheet on the main screen. He had seen my data before. He knew what I was capable of. He finally cleared his throat. He didn't look at me. He looked at his team. She's right. The supply chain is a mess. We need to change. We need to listen." It was the beginning. He hadn't called me daughter. He hadn't called me Serena. He had just called me right. And for now, that was enough. 1 year later, it was Thanksgiving. The scene was very different. I wasn't in my small one-bedroom apartment, and I certainly wasn't at my parents' house in the suburbs. I was in my home, the one I had secretly owned for 5 years, a penthouse apartment overlooking Centennial Park, with floor-to-ceiling windows that showed the entire Atlanta skyline. This was the home I had built for myself, the one they never knew existed. The doorbell chimed. I opened it, and my parents, Marcus and Brenda, stood there. They looked smaller, humbled. My father was holding a bottle of sparkling cider. My mother was holding a Tupperware container. "I made your favorite potato salad, Serena," she said, her voice quiet. She didn't try to hug me, she just offered the container. "Thank you, Mom," I said, and I meant it. I took it from her. "Come on in." They walked into my home, their eyes wide. They had never been here. They looked at the art on the walls, the spacious open kitchen, but they didn't comment on the money. They didn't talk about the view. They just looked quiet. My sister Danielle was already there, sitting on the sofa. She was talking to Maya. Danielle looked good. She was wearing a simple dress, her hair was pulled back, and she was laughing at something Maya's husband said. She had been working for 8 months as an administrative assistant at a dental office. Last month, she had sent me a text telling me she registered for her first night class at a community college. Accounting, she'd written. Go figure. Maya and her family were here because they were my family, the people I worked with every day, the people I respected and who respected me. My father walked over to the window, looking out. "It's a beautiful view, Serena," he said. "Thank you, Dad," I replied. The day was normal. It was quiet. There was no tension, no barbed comments, no golden child or scapegoat. My father and Maya's husband talked about football. My mother and Maya talked about recipes. And Danielle helped me in the kitchen. "Can you mash these potatoes?" I asked. She looked at me, surprised. "Me? You trust me?" "They're just potatoes, Danielle. You can't fraud them." She flinched, but then she smiled, a real smile. "Yeah, okay, I can do that." We worked in silence for a few minutes. "He got sentenced last week," she said quietly. "I knew. Chad. 10 years. "Yeah," she said. "I sent in my victim impact statement. Maya helped me write it." She paused, mashing the potatoes. "Thank you for not just, letting me go down with him. I was so stupid. I was so awful to you." "Yes, you were," I said. "I'm sorry, Serena," she said, her voice thick. "I really am." "I know, Danielle," I said. And I did. We sat down to eat. The food was good. The conversation was light. It was just a Thanksgiving. My phone, sitting on the counter, buzzed. I glanced at it. It was a call from Dad. My heart did a strange little flip. He was sitting right across the table. He was calling me. He saw me look at the phone and his own face looked confused. He fumbled for his own phone in his pocket. "Oh, shoot, I must have pocket dialed you. Sorry, Serena." He went to hang up. But I looked at my phone and then at him. "It's okay, Dad," I smiled. "I'll pick up." I answered the phone. "Hello?" My father, looking at me from across the table, his face a mixture of confusion and dawning understanding, put his own phone to his ear. "Hey, Serena," he said, his voice quiet. "Hey, Dad," I said, my voice just as quiet. The whole table had stopped, watching us.
He fumbled. "I just wanted to say, I love you, Serena. I'm really proud of you." Tears pricked my eyes. The words I had waited 32 years to hear. They hadn't come as a grand pronouncement. They'd come as an accidental, honest-to-God truth. I smiled at him, my real, full smile. "I love you too, Dad. I'm proud of you too." We hung up, and the table was silent for a beat, and then Maya raised her glass. "To family," she said. "All kinds." And we all raised our glasses. My parents said my sister deserved the house, so they left her everything. Then they texted me to cover the mortgage. I replied, "Ask the owner." 2 days later, they called me crying, and that time I didn't pick up. I let them fall. But today, when my father calls, I pick up. When my sister texts, I answer. Because I learned that the sweetest revenge isn't in destroying your family, it's in forcing them to see the truth. And in the wreckage, if you're lucky, you find the space to build a new one, a real one, on your terms.